Hello, welcome to another session in our teaching series, Hidden Facts in Biology. In this video, we'll be looking at sense organs and other that we'll be taking the organ of hearing, which is the ear. By way of introduction, the mammalian ear is a sense organ that carries out the function of hearing and balancing. It is divided into three regions, namely the external ear, which is also known as the outer ear, the middle ear, which is also known as the tympanic cavity, and the inner ear, also known as the labyrinth. So I will show you a diagram that shows the vertical section of the mammalian ear, and with that we'll be talking about the various parts. So in this diagram we can see the various parts of the mammalian ear. So the first part I want us to talk about is the outer ear. The outer ear consists of the pinna. The pinna is also known as the auricle. It also consists of the external auditory canal, which is also known as the ear tube. And then we have the tympanic membrane, which is known as the eardrum. So for the pinna is made of soft cartilages covered by skin. It is flexible and is only found in mammals. The function of this pinna is that it collects sound waves and directs them into the auditory meatus or the auditory canal, and it can also detect the direction of sound waves. Now the next part is the auditory canal or ear tube. This is a narrow passage, and this narrow passage contains glands that produces wax. It also contains fine hairs, and these fine hairs helps to prevent tiny insects, dust, and germs from entering the ear. And the last part of the outer ear we'll be looking at is the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. And this tympanic membrane or eardrum is found at the end of the ear tube. The function of the tympanic membrane is that it separates the outer ear from the middle ear. It also helps to transmit sound waves from the outer ear to the middle ear. Having a look at the parts of the outer ear and the function of this individual part, we'll be looking at the parts of the middle ear. The middle ear is also known as the tympanic cavity, and it consists of the ear ossicles and the eustachian tube. The ear ossicles, they are held in place by muscles, and they include the following: the malleus, also known as the hammer, the incus, also known as the anvil, and the stapes, also known as the stirrup. So what are the functions of this part? The malleus or hammer is attached to the tympanic membrane. It receives vibration from the tympanic membrane and transmits it to the incus. The incus or anvil connects the malleus at one end and stops at the other end. While for the stapes or stirrup, it is the smallest bone in the body and it fits into the oval window which opens to the inner ear. These three ossicles, that is the hammer, anvil, and the stirrups, they form a movable bridge linking the outer and inner ear. A second membrane, which is known as the round window, connects the middle ear with the inner ear. The ossicles transmit vibrations, that is sounds, across the tympanic membrane to the oval window. They also magnify the pressure on the oval window several times. Now we'll briefly talk about the eustachian tube. The eustachian tube, which is the second part of the middle ear, is a narrow tube found in this middle ear. It is connected to the back of the pharynx. The eustachian tube helps to equalize the air pressure in the middle ear. Equalized pressure is actually needed for the proper transmission of sound waves. The eustachian tube also allows air from the surrounding to enter or leave the middle ear so that the air pressure on both sides of the eardrum is balanced and equal. So having looked at the parts of the outer and middle ear, we are going to be discussing the inner ear in another diagram. With this diagram, we'll be talking about the inner ear. The inner ear contains a complex bony passage called the labyrinth, and it is filled with a fluid called the perilymph. There is also a membranous lambrate filled with another fluid, and this fluid is called the endolymph. All these form two important sensory structures. These are the cochlea, which is the organ for hearing, and the semicircular canals, which contains three parts: the posterior, the superior, and horizontal canal. There is also the utriculus and the sacculus, which are concerned with balance. The three semicircular canals are attached to the utriculus, and each semicircular canal at the point of its attachment to the utriculus is swollen to form what is known as the ampulla. The ampulla contains sensitive cells. The cochlea, which is responsible for hearing, arises from the sacculus. It is a hollow structure and it is squared like a snail's shell. The cochlea is concerned with the organ of hearing. The cochlea is divided internally into three chambers by two membranes which run along the length. The cells which are sensitive to vibrations are called hair cells and are arranged on the lower membrane of the middle chamber of the cochlea. And these sensitive cells form the organ of Corti. Having looked at the inner ear, now we are going to be talking about the functions of the ear. The ear performs two functions, and these are the hearing and maintenance of balance. We will talk about the various mechanisms for hearing and also the mechanism of balance. First of all, let's look at the mechanism of hearing. For hearing to take place, sound waves enter the outer ear and travels through the external auditory canal until they reach the tympanic membrane, where they cause the membrane and attached chain of auditory ossicles to vibrate. The vibration of the auditory ossicles, that is the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, helps to amplify the sound. The round oval window, which is also known as the fenestra ovalis rotunda, also vibrates, passing the waves into the cavity of the inner ear or cochlea, where the perilymph vibrates and transmits the waves into the cochlea, causing the endolymph of the cochlea to vibrate. These vibrations are then transmitted across the organ of Corti, also known as the sensory nerve cell. These vibrations, what it does is that it actually stimulates the organ of Corti, and this sets up impulses that in turn stimulates the auditory nerve cells, which then transmits the impulses to the brain for interpretation by the auditory lobes of the brain into the different sounds we hear. So now let's talk about the mechanism involved in maintenance of balance. It is important to know that head movement in any direction affects the fluid known as the endolymph in the corresponding semicircular canals. Remember, we said that there are three: the horizontal, the posterior, and the superior canal. And these canals are at right angle to each other. So since the fluid in this canal are affected by head movement, this effect will force the sensory cells in the ampulla to set up impulses through the auditory nerve to the brain for interpretation. The brain then relays impulses to the body muscles for balancing the position of the body. Having looked at the various mechanisms involved in maintenance of balance and hearing, let's look at how we can care for our ears. Care of the ears. These are various ways you can care for the ear. First of all, the ear should be cleaned regularly with cotton wool. You should avoid the use of sharp objects for the ear. Avoid blows on the ear so that the tympanic membrane or eardrum is not damaged. Use protective earmuffs when working under conditions of high noise level. You should avoid area of high noise for a long period of time to prevent deafness. And if there's any ear problems, you consult a medical doctor. After looking at the care of ear, let us look at a condition known as deafness. Deafness, this is the inability to hear, and it can be temporary or permanent. It is usually due to one of the following. Number one, damage to the tympanic membrane. 2, stapes hardening and fusing with oval window so that it cannot vibrate. 3, blocking of the ear canal by wax. 4, blocking of the eustachian tube. 5, infection of the middle and inner ear. 6, damage to the sensory cells in the cochlea. And 7, exposure to loud noises constantly. So this brings us to the end of the teaching session. Now let's look at some questions. The first example says, a boy spins round several times and stops. He loses balance as he attempts to walk. A possible explanation for this could be A, height pressure in the ear fluid. B, too much air pressure in the middle ear. C, continuous movement of the fluid in the inner ear. D, rotation of the semicircular canals. The answer to this is C, continuous movement of the fluid in the inner canal. This is because the loss of balance results from the continuous movement of fluid in the ear. The next question is, which pair of structures contribute to balance in mammals? A, utriculus and sacculus. B, malleus and stapes. C. Sacculus and cochlear. D. Utriculus and pinna. E. Fenestra ovalis and circulus. The answer to this question is A. The utriculus and circulus are structures which are concerned with balance in mammals. They are found in the inner ear. The next question says the organ responsible for equalizing air pressure in the ear is the A. Sacculus, B. Utriculus, C. Eustachian tube, D. Ampulla, E. Ossicle. The answer to this question is C. The eustachian tube is the organ responsible for equalizing air pressure in the ear. The next question says the structure of the ear that is responsible for balancing is the A. Semicircular canal, B. Pinna, C. Auditory nerve, D. Fenestra ovalis. The answer to this question is A. The semicircular canal are structures responsible for balancing. It does the function alongside with the utriculus and circulus. The next question says the part of the ear in mammals responsible for the detection of sound is the A. Utriculus, B. Tympanum, C. Cochlear, D. Semicircular canal. The answer to this question is C. The cochlear is the part of the ear responsible for sound detection. This brings us to the end of the examples. Now we'll be taking some exercises. These exercises were gotten from our book in Hidden Facts in Biology in pages 244. And the answers are provided in the answer section. Do it to get your copy and check the answers if they are correct. Thank you.